Good morning. I'm Jane Morgan, and thank you for joining me today on this edition of the JMM Expert Insight Series. Today, I am joined by Charles Whitfield, the chairman of NH3 Clean Energy. Good morning, Charles.
Good morning.
So, Charles, this week we've seen a significant announcement from Fortescue and CMB Tech around those ammonia-capable shipping vessels. Why do you think this has attracted so much attention, across the shipping industry?
Well, a lot of focus is on the Pilbara because the Iron Corridor is the busiest shipping route in the world by tonnage. It actually represents 5% of maritime transport, so it's a huge proportion. And therefore, the lead in decarbonisation of marine transport, it's a critical route to work on. And this has been much anticipated. A lot of the infrastructure and planning has been put in place. And this order of 12 bulk carriers, Newcastle Max carriers, has obviously cemented that pathway, and that's why it's drawn so much attention.
And look, of course, the vessels themselves are important, but what does this announcement tell us about the future of ammonia demand?
Well, it's significant, and the whole thematic around the decarbonisation of shipping is going to be transformational in terms of the demand profile for clean ammonia. These 12 ships alone would probably demand something like 350,000 to 400,000 tons of ammonia per year as fuel. So, to put that in context, there are about 320 ships which operate on the Pilbara to Asia Iron Corridor route. So, there's a huge growth potential there. I mean, a typical ammonia plant produces about 1 million tons. So, it's a really meaningful amount of demand which is being added with each of these orders of new ships.
Well, Charles, you touched on this just earlier, but let's dive a bit further into it. Why is ammonia increasingly being viewed as one of the preferred solutions for maritime decarbonisation?
Sure. So, I mean, just to back up a little bit, the maritime decarbonisation is a huge thematic at the moment because shipping represents something like 4 to 5% of global emissions. If it was a country, it would be about the fifth largest emitter in the world. So there's been a huge effort to decarbonise marine transport. Um, there are a number of alternative fuels that have been looked at, things like LNG and methanol, but they're still hydrocarbons. So even though it reduces emissions, it doesn't eliminate them if you switch to those as your fuel sources. As opposed to ammonia, which, as our name suggests, is NH3, it doesn't have any carbon in it. And therefore, when you use it as a fuel, you're not emitting any carbon dioxide at all. And that's why ultimately that's the preferred route. If you look at the major shipping companies like our partners MOL, that's what they're focused on in terms of their long-term fuel.
Let's just go back to the Pilbara to Asia Iron Ore Corridor route, which of course has been discussed at length. Why is that corridor so important?
Well, it's important for a couple of reasons. First of all, its scale. As I mentioned, it's the busiest shipping route by tonnage in the world, and represents a meaningful amount of the overall global traffic. The other thing is it's eminently suitable for changing to an alternative fuel because it's a point-to-point route. So unlike many routes which might start in port A and go to port B and then on to port C and so on and so forth, the iron ore corridor, typically everything starts really at Port Hedland or Dampier, and then goes to a designated port in Asia where the steel mills would be to unload the iron ore, and then the ship returns. So it's going back and forth on the same route. So if you have a bunkering hub at the Pilbara, essentially you can cover the entire traffic on that route from one single point. And that's a very unusual situation. And hence it's an obvious place to start to initiate clean shipping.
Let's now jump to NH3's WAH2 project. How is this going to fit into the evolving shipping landscape?
Well, the project, the WAH2 project, is central to the whole proposition of ammonia bunkering in the Pilbara. So we're uniquely positioned to feed that market. We're located just a couple dozen kilometers south of Dampier, and we will be producing 650,000 tons of ammonia and shipping that by pipeline up to Dampier, which already has ammonia facilities. We have a joint development agreement in place with the Pilbara Ports Authority and a company called Oceania Marine Energy. So the Pilbara Ports Authority are essentially putting the port infrastructure in place. And then Oceania Marine Energy operate a bunker vessel, which is essentially the refueling barge. So all the pieces of the puzzle, the fuel, the requisite equipment, and the bunkering service are all going to be in place. And then on top of that, as I mentioned, we've already signed MOUs with Itochu and also Mitsui OSK Lines, MOL, who are the biggest bulk carrier operator on the route and also absolutely dedicated to ammonia fueling of their vessels.
Absolutely. And look, I think one of the criticisms that are often leveled at the alternative fuels is that demand may not materialize. I mean, with the Fortescue announcement this week, does that help address these concerns?
It does. I mean, I've been working in energy transition and alternative fuels for about 20 years, and in everyone, it was exactly the same thing with lithium. People said, "Oh, there's not going to be the demand," or the other half said, "Oh, there's not going to be the supply." And you've got exactly the same situation in the clean ammonia world at the moment, where all the naysayers are pointing to one or other side of the equation and saying, "Oh, well, that's not going to be there." The point is, it is. And the way that it gets started is by bilateral contracts. And then over time, as there's more and more scale on both sides of the equation, then it becomes a much more deep and liquid market. And it was the same with LNG, like I say, same with lithium, so on and so forth. It's the way markets develop. But this change is happening. And it's remarkable actually how little attention it's had in Australia because it's one of the few clean energy plays where Australia is actually a leader.
Absolutely. Let's dive into that a bit more then. In your opinion, Charles, what needs to happen next for that ammonia fueled shipping to kind of move from that early adoption into mainstream use?
There are a number of things. I mean, what you will have observed if you're watching the industry is actually there are bunkering trials going on around the world for clean ammonia. They've taken place. Actually, the first one was at Dampier. There have also been ones in Korea, Japan, Singapore, Rotterdam. The processes and equipment is getting put in place. Like I say, there are some routes which are a lot easier to transfer over. There are some which are going to take a little bit longer. But what you're seeing is a global network of ammonia bunkering being rolled out. We're obviously very focused on not only the Pilbara, but the rest of Asia Pacific. And under our agreement with Itochu, it's contemplated would be a supplier of ammonia to them for their bunkering aspirations in Singapore and in Japan and the rest of the region.
On that then, so how important is West Australia's strategic location in this opportunity?
It's critical, really. I mean, we are a blue ammonia producer, so we require gas, but also CO2 sequestration. I mean, we sequester 99.6% of our processed CO2. There are very few locations around the world where you actually have a confluence of all the necessary parts. So you need gas, you need CO2 sequestration, and you need port infrastructure, whether you're providing ammonia as a bunkering fuel or alternatively as another energy source like they're using in Japan for co-firing their power stations. You need to be close to your market or access to your market. So Western Australia and Dampier in particular is almost unique in Asia Pacific. And it's probably one of three places around the world where this really works at scale.
Charles, I think it's important maybe just to jump in here and just talk about ammonia and perhaps the uses of it and the global opportunity of where it actually is used.
Sure. I mean, traditionally, as most people are aware, ammonia is key to the fertilizer industry. About 75% of ammonia currently goes into fertilizers. About 50% of production goes into urea, and 25% going into other ammonia-based fertilizers. The rest, obviously, is used as a precursor for other chemicals, most notably explosives, which the Australian mining industry relies on. So it's already about a 200 million ton a year market. It's very established. But that has typically been grey ammonia. So what that means is ammonia, which actually produces CO2 or emits CO2 as part of its manufacturing process. So interestingly, there are two dynamics going on at the moment. One is huge growth in demand for clean ammonia as a fuel. The other one is at the same time a change on the supply side, where a lot of the old producers are being shut down because of their emissions. And therefore, not only have you got a tightening of supply, but you've also got growth of demand at the same time. The other thing which has exacerbated all this, of course, is the conflict in the Middle East, because the Middle East was a large producer. So specifically in Asia, Asian countries are looking to secure supply from regional providers, and we're ideally placed for that market.
I know you've been to a few presentations recently, and there's been some independent reports out there. Can you perhaps just give us a little bit more info on where they're seeing the ammonia market playing and where they're seeing the demand coming from?
Absolutely. So, in terms of the market, base load ammonia demand, so for fertilizers and so on, grows pretty much in a straight line with population growth. I mean, obviously, it is key to feeding the world, and so that's no surprise. So that's your sort of base. But for ammonia fuel, you're looking at huge components of additional demand. I mean, as we mentioned, the fact that 12 ships would add, 350,000 tons of demand in one block. If you roll that out to, the broader shipping market, then that's going to be a huge additional component. Added to which, ammonia is just a great fuel for other hard to abate industries. So the Japanese, for example, are looking to displace coal in some of their coal-fired power stations using ammonia. It's also being used as a gas substitute and so on. So the estimates are that ammonia will actually be growing at about a 30% annualized CAGR over the next 20 years, which is huge growth. You don't see that in many other areas. And at the end of the day, this is another critical mineral. The Chinese, American, Japanese governments all deem this to be a critical supply.
Charles, let's dive a little bit deeper into the WAH2 project. It's obviously at a very advanced stage. So can you just give us a little bit more details on where the project is at the moment and what investors can look forward to over the coming months?
Sure. So we are in FEED, which is the final stage before final investment decision at the moment. The way that we've approached the project right from the outset is essentially one of de-risking to make it as clear a pathway to first production as possible. The way that we've done that is essentially using established technology. We have a technology partner called Topsoe, who are the global leader in ammonia technology. We've also brought in Linde, who are probably the preeminent industrial gas company for our engineering partner and seeing the project all the way through to production. So they are obviously helping at the moment with FEED engineering, then would go into construction and commissioning and have an operating and maintenance contract with them going forward. In addition to that, I mean, the whole premise of the project is that we're a DOM gas customer, so we have fixed price inputs, and we will have long-term fixed price offtake contracts with our customers, and that makes financing relatively straightforward. So as far as typical project financiers are concerned, this is a very conventional infrastructure play with very predictable cash flows, and that obviously makes it a lot easier to work out what the debt profile is and so on and so forth. In terms of the equity component for that, that comes from our strategic partners in line with their offtake, and also project financiers typically want to put some equity alongside their debt as well. So we feel very comfortable with the pathway that we have, and we've done this on a very accelerated timeline. Really, it's been 4 years in development to this stage, another 3-year build, and then we're in cash flow for the stage one and looking at growth for future stages.
And just further to that, then, news flow. What can investors look forward to from a news flow perspective or an announcement perspective over the next sort of 3 to 6 months?
Sure. Well, it's a busy time. Obviously, we've had an awful lot of intensity of news flow over the last 6 months, and that will only accelerate as more clarity around who our partners are on all of those different aspects. Firming up financing, firming up offtake, firming up around engineering, and so on and so forth. So basically all the things that you would expect in the run up to FID.
Also, so the WAH2 Clean Ammonia Project was granted that federal major project status. Can you explain what that means and how important that is for the company?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we also have state recognition for the project as well as federal major project status. So there are 30 projects across Australia with major project status, and that includes things like airports and dams and rail and all the rest of it. So it highlights just how important the project is, and that essentially is because it enables so many other industries, like the bunkering industry and its, energy export and part of the clean energy transformation as well. So that's why it's got the recognition it has. In terms of the practical effect of that, obviously that helps with all the interaction with government bodies through the approvals process. It also means that we have a lot more access in terms of ministerial meetings and liaison with international customers as well through government entities. So it has been an extremely valuable status to have for the project.
Thank you. And just finally, if investors are to take away sort of one message from not only the development from Fortescue, but also about NH3's WAH2 project, what would that be?
I would say I think people need to look at this area because it's been under the radar. I did the turnaround of Galaxy Lithium probably 15 years ago or something like that, and experienced exactly the same thing, where most people were unaware of even the existence of electric cars and so on. I was based in Asia at the time and saw it all coming. It's exactly the same situation here. Asia is leading the world, and unfortunately Australia doesn't seem to have noticed this trend, but it's as big as those other thematics in terms of energy transition. And obviously the global shipping market is a huge one. So I'd suggest that people start to look at the area, do a bit of research, and see what the opportunity is.
Absolutely. And of course, that supports the pathway to the FID, which of course is targeted by the end of 2026. So very exciting times ahead.
Indeed.
Well, Charles, look, thanks so much for joining me on this edition of the JMM Expert Insight Series. We look forward to future updates.
Thank you, Jane. I appreciate it, and I look forward to the next update as well.